What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the games I am most excited for in the back half of 2025, because, as I'm sure many of you watching this are aware, with the sort of mid-year announcement shows having recently passed us by, we do pretty much know what the back half of 2025 looks like in terms of releases, except for a few games we are waiting for release dates for, specifically, but otherwise, you can more or less get a pretty good picture of what's to come, and seeing how the first half of 2025 already saw the release of most of the games I was looking forward to the most for the year. I was going over announcements and things and just kind of seeing what I was particularly excited for, which naturally I wanted to share with you. A couple of qualifiers though. One, it should be pretty obvious, but I'm only really talking about new releases here and full games at that. So there are a bunch of DLCs upcoming. There's DLCs I'm playing through right now as an example that I am obviously looking forward to, but thinking a little bigger in scope for the sake of this video. And then another one is there are a couple of remasters upcoming that are, really cool looking. To give an example of an easy one, there's a remaster for Neverwinter Nights 2 via its Enhanced Edition, which is releasing in July, that I plan on covering, and while I'm very excited for that, I've also completely played through and beaten Neverwinter Nights 2 before, and I kind of know what to expect from that already. And then last but not least, this should be obvious with the title of the video, but I am, of course, only talking about 2025. There's plenty of things that will be releasing in 2026 that I'm already definitely looking forward to, and certainly more so than some of these at that. With that said and out of the way, let's actually dive into this and start talking about some of these games. First, I wanted to add the most recent addition to this particular list via Dispatch, an upcoming narrative game centering around a dispatch worker dispatching a group of heroes who were themselves previously villains so they can handle all sorts of jobs, but it's obviously a really big narrative game. But it's also got a lot of big names behind it, including people behind some really well received narrative games at that, and coupled with a demo as part of the recent Steam Next Fest that I think did a really great job at showcasing what this game was all about. This game went from a game I was just kind of generally interested in when it was announced to something I am absolutely going to be reviewing. I have a couple of questions about it, namely, can it do anything with its superhero narrative that feels especially fresh, which again I think the demo at least alludes to the fact that they might be able to. And then, of course, how good the story is with all of its alternate endings and twists and turns and how all of that stuff pans out. And simply put, a ton of potential here, and I'm looking forward to playing it in its full release. Unfortunately, no full release date for that one. It's just supposed to be coming in 2025 sometime. Next up, we've got Hell Is Us, an upcoming action game centered around a strange paranormal phenomenon inside an isolated country that our character, is returning to, having escaped from there as a child. This was another game with a fantastic game demo during the Steam Next Fest, but for me at least, this game is like a strange mixture of proper action games with stuff like, say, Resident Evil, both in terms of mechanics in some cases, like solving odd little mysteries and puzzles, alongside the sort of general aesthetic of something like Resident Evil. And that mixed with some of the pretty advanced technology we clearly have access to, and then the sort of bizarre and somewhat unexplained approach they're taking to things that are clearly not of this reality, let's say. And all of that's pretty fine on its own, but it's also incorporating a sort of quest system that we are seeing more and more games take note of, in that the game presents it as more of an investigation without ever actually telling you what to do or where to go, so it has some non-linearity to it, as that quest system invites a little more ambiguity in terms of your options and what you as the player can choose to do. So basically, this game's trying to do a lot of fun things, and while I definitely think there's some obvious jankier parts of it, it's got a lot of potential, and I'm hoping it manages to land well. But I suppose we'll see when it launches on September 4th. But that does bring us to our third entry, which just so happens to be The Necromancer's Tale, an upcoming CRPG that puts you in the role of an up-and-coming necromancer who is returned home to sort of deal with his father's passing, only to discover an ancient ritual tome full of all sorts of necromantic secrets, and that sets you on your journey to becoming a full-fledged necromancer as you try to hide things and navigate all the twists and turns of this story. And I think you can probably tell just straight away by looking at this game, it's probably not going to be a smash hit or anything. It's very clearly an indie title, but as somebody who loves CRPGs in particular, I think this game is going to scratch an incredibly specific itch that I don't think a lot of other games come close to. And while obviously it doesn't exactly have the production value of many other games, what I've played of it via both its previous demo and its updated one for the Steam Next Fest fills me with a lot of hope for what this game is going to be. And I get the impression, at least, that it's not exactly going to be for everybody, but the people who play it are probably really gonna love it. At least that's what I'm hoping anyway, as it obviously hasn't released yet, and we won't find out more until July, which isn't that much longer, but either way, very much so looking forward to jumping into this one. I've been waiting on it for quite some time. Coming in at number 4, a game I haven't had a chance to talk about just yet, because it was one of 2 things announced at PlayStation's recent State of Play that was of interest to me, since it is also coming to PC, and that is Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles, which is releasing on September 30th, so a little ways away, but not all that far. Now, probably one of the best things about this is just the simple fact that it makes a very convenient case for me to actually get around to reviewing Final Fantasy Tactics finally, as it's one of those games that people have been asking me to take a look at forever. That is to say, in terms of a review. I have played it a little bit here and there. But also, I really love the setting of Final Fantasy Tactics. I think Ivalice is one of the more interesting places in the Final Fantasy worlds, and you add on top of that some quality of life type of stuff that is, of course, kind of inherent in something like this. And I'm definitely looking forward to diving in and taking a look at it, of course. Not least of which, because this is, one of those games that has seen different releases and different localizations and stuff like that. I believe there was a version that even added, classes and things. So I'm very curious to wind up seeing what the sort of remaster here winds up doing in terms of adding all of that, or what it chooses to leave out, etc. That's always a bit of an interesting conversation around these types of game releases. But obviously, time will tell. But that does bring us to our final entry, and it is none other than The Outer Worlds 2, which is an interesting case because if you watched my video on this exact game not all that long ago, a couple days I believe, you're probably pretty aware that, like many others, I don't love the pricing of this one. And while I simply wouldn't be doing my job if I chose to ignore something like that, I simply also must say that I'm really looking forward to the game itself. Primarily because, for starters, Obsidian's pretty good at sequels, kind of their whole thing, bit of a meme at this point. But one thing I think Obsidian does really well is actually respond to the feedback they get on initial entries and applying that feedback to the second go-round. And so, when they showed off this game as part of their big deep dive, it looks like they've already addressed a lot of things that I had concerns with about the original, like the lack of throwables, the ironically flawed flaws system that was a really cool idea, but execution needed some work, and a host of other things. And so, because of all that, The Outer Worlds 2 is a game that genuinely looks like they're moving in the right direction in terms of feedback from the original game. And I think it's a real shame, then, that Microsoft is going to wind up turning the conversation around this game to being one almost entirely about the price instead of the merits or, problems, potentially even, I don't know, it's not released yet, with the game itself. And it's definitely pretty clear that's on Microsoft specifically and not Obsidian. And as a result of that, honestly, I have a feeling that having been doing this a while and seeing how these things tend to go, it's probably going to be a case of it's a good game, but, is it worth $80? And it's obvious that price is, yes, meant to push people onto Game Pass, but even then, there's already talk of them raising the price of that gaming subscription at that point. Never mind the fact that a Game Pass subscription, while honestly a very good deal for what it is, also just doesn't work for some people, like myself as an example. And then there's the inevitable conversation people will have about how $80 is fine actually because inflation, which I suppose might be true if you were to ignore literally every other factor around the gaming market and why prices have been what they have been for the last 20 years. And all of that to say, it's a conversation I'm already exhausted of because it tends to be a lot of the same stuff on repeat, which I find frustrating in this specific case because I'm actually really looking forward to the game itself, but that is an inevitable conversation that will have to be had. So with any luck, the game itself will be worth the annoyance. Either way, though, I suppose we'll all find that out together at the end of October when it officially releases. But for right now, I think that's pretty well gonna wrap it up. I think that's about everything I've got to say for this particular video, so I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, as I hope you'll be sticking around for the reviews themselves for all these games when they drop over the next few months. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.